This is John Goldie, just following up with some of the comments and questions about independence. The last video I did was building up to that type of thing where you're playing a constant bass, which is just very straight, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're also starting to syncopate these parts, so these are not on the beat all the time. So we've basically stuck to E on the bass all the time, and the reason for that is simple. It's just there's not much point in going through other chords if the coordination thing and the syncopation thing isn't working well with one chord. So it's easier to do it with one chord to start with. What you can do, of course, is you could change around a little bit. You can keep the E on the bass and maybe play like a D chord here and an A chord and E. So you've got and it's up to you how you phrase it, if you like. So you could go now. Again, that sounds pretty straightforward. You can take these chords, the D, the A and the E, and play them somewhere else in the neck as well. If you don't know that, that's something that's worth learning. So you could play that D chord here, you could play the A chord there, and you could play E there if you wanted. So you could get this. And you can, of course, add notes, so you could do like, and then or you could take it up to here. Or you could change. So there's a whole bunch of different things you can do, and that's just using the same chords all the time. Like I was saying before, there's not a huge amount of point in going to, like if you're doing the blues thing, going to the next chords, like the A7 chord or the B7 chord in a typical 12-bar blues, because the syncopated problems that you would have, or the issues you would have with timing and phrasing, are going to be the same for any chord really. So the idea of starting on the E is that's a good starting point. We don't need to fret any notes, we can just play like that, and the E string is open all the time. The important part here is to really be able to play these things comfortably in time, and you can change the phrasing around to suit yourself. So you could, like I said before, you could let it ring out, play on the beat, you could let it ring out, play it off the beat, or you could sort of cut the chord off sharp, so you and again, I'm sort of palm muting the E there just to go with the sound. So if I'm going to cut it off shorter, so basically as soon as I hit that chord, I'm just taking the pressure off the string, so stops the chord dead really. So if you do this, as soon as you take the pressure off, obviously it stops dead. So you're going. And that's really worth spending a bit of time on. When I'm doing workshops and I've got a bit of time with people at the workshop, it's usually everyone's quite different. Everyone's like slightly different levels, slightly different standards, and what they tend to find is that they all have slightly different issues with it, as I did when I was working on it, and still do to some extent with certain new things I'm doing. You have to really, again, slow things down and just figure out exactly where the problem is, because if you keep just playing a thing over and over again, it might get better eventually, but you're probably quicker to try and isolate the one area that is a bit of an issue. So the one that we did right at the very start, that thing where it's like, the problem everyone had with that was as soon as you do, your thumb stops, or your thumb loses the rhythm. And so in order to, play something a bit more complicated than that, you really need to be comfortable with that. So that's one of the frustrating things, is that you think, oh, right, okay, I think I've got that. But then when you try and play something different, or you go to another chord, which I was saying before, then you're going to run into a few other issues. So if we were looking at playing just like a single line thing over the same bass, and again, we're just going to stick to E for the moment, your phrasing now is going to be, rather than, you could also incorporate little sort of smaller chords in it, or thirds or whatever, but you can also play single notes. So if you imagine what you're trying to do is you're trying to improvise something, and I would keep it really pretty simple. One thing to bear in mind, and again this comes up every so often, it's a very simple thing, but in the E7 chord, this note here is G sharp, and in the minor pentatonic scale it's G natural, which obviously is going to clash. So if I played, this is G natural here and this is G sharp, it's got a bit of a clash to it. It's one of those things where you think, oh right, that's the correct chord, and I'm pretty sure minor pentatonic is also the scale that people use on that, but we do have that slight problem where that doesn't really work. That's a slight clash, which is why when I was doing I did a hammer-on. Okay, now the hammer-on works because you've got a little bit of tension with that note, which is clashing slightly, and then the release of the tension when you go to the G sharp. Now, if I was playing this note, for example, against that chord, you could hammer on, but if you hammer on, you're still going to have that same note, so you're still going to have a bit of a clash. So what's a good idea is just to bend the note slightly up. So you bend the note up, you're not bending to another note though, so you're not bending up half a step to the G sharp, you're just in between somewhere. So if I'm go back to that simple exercise, so I'm bending that note up just enough that it doesn't sort of clash anymore. So it's not an exact science this, it's really, you have to use your ears. So if I'm doing, so that, so they all work, but if I just, that one note is really important, just to make sure. And all those kind of pull-offs, and they all create that sort of tension and release thing, like that one there. So if I was improvising this, because we're going back to what we were doing in the first place, so you've got this constant bass going, and then you need to think about playing any notes in there. So again, you could start off really simple. And what I'm doing is just subtly changing the phrasing so it's not quite as simple. So Now again, I'm making this up. This is not something that I've learnt as a piece. The idea is that you can just make stuff up. So when you're improvising, obviously you can do your own thing. You can do your own phrasing. You can pick your own notes. But I would again start it quite simply, so that you're only really adding a couple of notes, or you might revert back to the thing we did before, the little chordal thing, and occasionally anybody who is getting into this tries all these things, sees, check out if you can do them yourself, and then once you get to that point, go past that point and get to the point where you personally think, okay, I'm feeling really comfortable with this, it works great, I can do my own thing with it. And then that's when you build on like a mixture of single notes and chords and all sorts of stuff. And then that's also when I would go to the next chord as well, go to the A7 and the B7. And what you'll find is that it's exactly the same thing. So if you're on the A chord, and if I went to the B chord, so when you're doing that, it's exactly the same technique. Again, I would slow it down a little bit when you're working on this at the start. So again, the idea is that at the end of the day, you can literally start to just make something up with the bass. Like, now, it's going to go wrong occasionally, and you might miss a beat or something, or I've probably done it when I'm filming these things as well. That's not really the end of the world. That's really part and parcel of learning this kind of stuff. The idea is the overall groove that you're doing doesn't really stop at any point. It keeps going. So if you accidentally hit two notes or something, or you missed one out, that wouldn't really make any difference to the overall thing. The overall thing is just the feel. You can, of course, once you get used to that, you could take it, take the notes up the neck, and it'll work everywhere on the neck. But I'll probably do another couple of videos, just maybe more on when we move that up the neck a little bit. We have a kind of forum, I suppose, between all the people on the newsletter, etc. So if there's any parts of this you're not sure about, or if you want to send your own videos in, I can certainly sort of give you some feedback on that. And if you have any specific questions or anything that you're maybe not too sure about or haven't explained well enough or whatever, then just let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you.